Item number 2, Southern California Public Power Authority Financial Transaction Review for fiscal years 2014, 15, and 16. Vince?
Exactly, that's it. Good afternoon, committee members and city staff. We are here to present our report on the Southern California Public Power Authority, or Scppa, Financial Transactions Review for fiscal years 2014, 2015, and 2016. A little bit of background information. In December at the Governmental Affairs Committee, you guys requested us to perform an assessment of RPU's financial transactions related to Scppa. And our objective was to determine whether or not Scppa transactions were consistent with Scppa contract guidelines and applicable city procurement policies and practices for the years 2014, 2015, and 2016. So after our review, our research, discussions with departmental personnel and review of documentation, we did conclude that RPU's procurement of energy efficiency programs and other Scppa member services have been conducted in compliance with the terms of the Scppa agreement and applicable city procurement policies and practices. In addition to that, RPU had previously already implemented the following internal controls for more transparency and accountability. Number 1, there's a Scppa procurement form that's submitted to the RPU CFO to ensure budget availability. A Scppa task order to accept services approved by the RPU general manager or that general manager's designee. RPU's Board of Utilities and City Council approval is required for Scppa purchases over $50,000. Purchases between $25,000 and $50,000 are approved by the city manager, and purchases up to $25,000 can be approved by the RPU general manager. Finally, the Board of Public Utilities and the City Council receive a biannual report of all Scppa financial transactions for the most recent period. The last report was submitted to the board on February 26, 2018, and to the City Council on March 26, 2018. And with that, our recommendation is that the Governmental Affairs Committee receive, review, provide input on, and recommend to the City Council approval of the Scppa Financial Transactions Review for fiscal years 2014, 15, and 16. And with that, I'll take any questions, and I believe we also have some representatives from RPU if you have any department-specific questions that they might be able to answer as well.
Thank you for the report. Any clarifying questions before we go to public comment? We do have a public comment card. Jason Hunter.
Jason Hunter, Ward 1. I've read coloring books that had more substance in this report. This is embarrassing, okay? There is no such thing as Scppa money. There is only RPU ratepayer money that gets paid to Scppa. And this is not an audit to determine if RPU's involvement with Scppa is currently in compliance. It was an audit that was supposed to look at 3 years, I think 13, 14, and 15 to see if it was in compliance. And yet, this audit report doesn't say what the practices were. It's in the RPU's involvement with Scppa at the time. It doesn't mention what the city's policies and procedures were. It just lists them. There's no substance. So how can you make an effective determination of whether what staff's telling you is true or whether this is what I believe it to be, a whitewash of executive corruption? Okay? You don't know? The public can't tell? Hell, there weren't even any backup documents connected to this report to see the policies, the applicable policies at the time that RPU was supposed to be in compliance with. So the public could, I have zero confidence in this report. This reminds me of, and I'm going to talk about it, I think, a little bit later during public comment. Be sure not to go anywhere, Cheryl, because you're going to like what I have to say. No, I don't think you're going to like it at all, but you better listen to it. what was wrong with what happened at Scppa? First of all, the charter doesn't allow for half of these activities. We all know this, okay? Needs to be changed. Number two, and I won't even go through all the policy violations. The Scppa this general manager was spending hundreds of thousands. In fact, I think I found a case where he spent $700,000 in 1 year on a consultant, never brought before the board or city council's approval. How is that possible? He has a $25,000 signature authority. Okay? I don't know if any of these things were competitively bid. I don't see any substantive contracts detailing price, scope, term. None of this is discussed within this audit report. All of this was brought to the city, the internal audit report's attention. Not even discussed in here. On top of other concerns I don't have time to get into now. Here's what needs to happen. This report needs to be tabled, continued. It needs to come back with the backup documents that the public can see, and it needs to actually have some breadth and some depth to it. This is gross. This is not, you are not fulfilling your fiduciary duty. I think at best this is misappropriation of funds, and at worst embezzlement. And you guys better start doing your job, because the next person I go to is the DA.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you. I don't have questions specifically, but I don't think this report addresses what I intended when I asked for it. What I was looking for was information on where did the money go in those 3 years and what were the rules and were they followed. We corrected the rules, and we know that the general manager and general managers back maybe into the dark ages were treating allocations of money through Scppa differently than allocations of money through the department as a regular city department head purpose. And we put a stop to that. We said you can't do that. You have to follow the same financial limits to authorize spending money through Scppa as you do spending money through the department directly. So the request really was intended to be how were the monies spent? What was spent? Were there significant expenditures over what would have been the spending limits? So I would like to see us come back with that sort of information. I'm sorry, I think you answered the wrong question. And that may be because I didn't explain it very well when I asked for it. But regardless, I don't think we have the answer that I was looking for, or at least the detail that lets us come up with the answer that I was looking for. So I would ask that you go back and take a look at where the dollars really went, what the policies were during those 3 years prior to when we implemented the clarifying change, and bring that report back when it's ready. I recognize it will take you some time. So as expeditiously as you reasonably can, and I won't ask you for a date. I know you'll do it as quickly as you can. But I think that's important. So I would make that as a motion.
Okay. Councilmember Condors.
Well, I agree with Councilmember Gardner. This is not what I thought it was going to be. I must agree with some of the things the speaker spoke, that the agenda item is lacking an awful lot of detail. And I will back your motion to have this brought back at a later date. It needs to be tabled and brought back. I don't see any substantial analysis in the report. I'd like to know line by line, policy by policy, why we were in compliance, or if we weren't, why we weren't. There's no backup documents that shows what was investigated. I mean, I feel like Leslie Nielsen in The Naked Gun in the front of the factory exploding fireworks. There's nothing to see here. Well, we don't know what was looked at. And we had an opportunity to help educate our public if we had these backup documents there, for no other reason to help teach them. You know, we all talk about the uninformed electorate. Well, we had a chance to let the electorate look at what was going on and provide them the ability to learn for themselves, and that was not provided here. We need to know what the practices were of Scppa at the time. What were our policies in the city? I'd like to see the policies side by side, line by line. and see if we were in compliance, not just to say there's nothing to look at here. I need to see what was looked at. So I said I will second your motion. We need the detail. We owe it for the clearance of the public. They need to see this.
Sure.
Vince, I have just a couple questions, not so much on this report right now, but there's an audit that we're doing on public utilities. Is that correct?
There was a performance audit that was conducted. I believe the report date on that audit was May 20th, 2016. And part of that audit did include a look at Scppa transactions and policies and procedures in place.
Now, what you're going to be able to identify the way the monies were spent through Scppa through that audit. Last time Cheryl was making a report to us regarding the audit, we asked specifically for that. And that will be included in the audit as well, correct?
Yes, we also did look at that in this particular audit. I did speak with RPU personnel, and we did go through some of their processes as to how payments are made through Scppa.
Okay, all right. The concern I have with this report is, the title of it, it shows that there are financial transaction review for the fiscal years 2014, 15, and 16. And I would have expected, as the other council members indicated, would have expected to see some transaction information on the attachment of the report. Just to get an idea of how long do you think it'll take you to put those 3 years together initially? Obviously, the audit would probably cover a greater period of time, but how long would it take you to get that to us, do you think?
I would imagine if we prioritize this, I'd look at Cheryl. 2? 2.
Now, will that be with the audit, or will that be with the request? Okay, so you'll be back with the audit. Then, Councilmember Gardner.
I'm happy to incorporate that into the motion if you feel comfortable that that gives you adequate time. I don't want to pinch you for time. If you need 90 or 120 days, I'd like you to take them. So if you're comfortable with 60, I'll put it in the motion. You can always come back in 60 days and say, this happened, I couldn't get it done, I want 30 more or whatever. So we'll amend the motion then to ask for a report back at our meeting 60 days-ish from now,
Okay.
whatever that date is.
Okay, good. And I think that's important to clarify. Obviously, this item was a little bit confusing to us, but I do recall us talking regarding specific Scppa expenses or bills that we paid to them. So I think we're all in accord. Well, did we receive a second from your motion?
You will get a second, but again, I want to see all of the documentation, paperwork of expenditures. I want to know where it went and why it went.
Sure.
So in terms of your motion on this particular item, you're just going to wait for the audit report.
Yeah, the motion is to ask staff to go back and do an audit that actually looks at the expenditures. Where did the money go? What were the policies that were in place at that time, and how do they differ from what the policies today are over those 3 years, and report that back to us.
Okay.
With supporting documentation if somebody wants to go see what that contract was.
Okay, all right. I think it's unanimous.
Thank you.
That we're going to go with that. Great, thank